Friends, welcome. My name is Rev.Nathan Detering. I am the Senior Minister at First Parish in Sherburne Unitarian Universalist Congregation. And I am one in a long line of Unitarian Universalist ministers at First Parish that our beloved Betty Dowse has known. I just happen to be the most recent. I want to thank each and every one of you for being here this morning, showing up for Betty and her family. You can see all of them. The Dowse family is in, they're below my box actually, but they're gathered there in the Dowse orchards in a socially distant manner, but all together. Thank you for showing up in this way. It's not what any of us expected and wanted, of course, but having known Betty since 2003 and known her for her grit and her determination, she would have appreciated our figuring out a way to do this morning. And this is why and how we are here. So just thank you for being here. About a month ago, many of us know that there was a big windstorm that came out of the north, and it came down into Metro West Boston. I live in Holliston. It came through Holliston, and then it blew right into Sherburne, up Route 16, about 70-mile-an-hour winds. And it took down all kinds of branches and limbs and trees. One of which, when I was driving around the next day on a Saturday morning, was this huge tree outside of Dowse Orchards. And I learned from Priscilla, one of Betty's children, that it was a bicentennial sycamore, also called a button tree. And this tree had been standing there since the Revolutionary War. Imagine that. And it fell right outside of Betty's home. And I was thinking about that tree and how, you know, a thing like that, a tree like that, we just never imagine it's going to be gone. And we can never imagine its absence. We think it's always going to be there forever. And I was thinking how that felt true for me and for Betty, who after 99 years of life and maybe, I'm sure, the biggest birthday parade that the town of Sherburne has ever seen in May that we had for her, a car parade, and who died at her beloved Loon Lake up in Maine, just, you know, in late September. I kind of felt about Betty the way that I felt about that tree, which is that I just always thought that she would be here, even though, of course, intellectually I knew that that wasn't true. Her presence was always constant. And so now we have come together in this way this morning to do what Betty wanted. I'll mention in a moment that she was very specific about what we would do this morning together. Betty, who, as we all know, was the matriarch of the town of Sherburne, of the Dowse family, of First Parish. She was as a teen became, I read this in the obituary, the first ever female junior Maine guide in 1937. She graduated from Wellesley College in 1942. She was a scientist, a chemistry teacher, beloved spouse of Charlie, who passed away in 1989, a mother to Charles, Alex, Mary, Nat, Priscilla, Catherine, and John. She was a grandmother to 5, a great-grandmother to 1. Betty was a world traveler. She was a tireless leader. She was a volunteer of time and talent and energy to the town and to the church in particular. She was an art community, a church community, a steady hand and a steady voice of reason through the church's many ups and downs, especially the downs. And she was the co-creator of what many of us know as the Good as New shop, or GANS, and I know that there are many of the women who helped to run and staff that shop, the consignment store in the basement. of the church since the early 1960s. That store, created by Betty to help the church survive. And she was a lover of the land, of apple orchards, and of Loon Lake, and of Maine, and of life, and of each of you. I knew this day would come, but I also felt like Betty would be here forever. I told this story at a small gathering we had for Betty on Zoom in early October, but I wanted to make sure the rest of us knew that in my first couple months of ministry at First Parish in Sherburne in 2003, I was like 30 years old. I was super young and super intimidated by the new job. And Betty called and made an appointment to meet with me. She actually called the administrator and said, I'd like to make an appointment with Nathan. So I found that out and I went down, it was a Wednesday, I went down to the Good as New shop and I see Janet Burnett there. I asked Janet, might have asked Dot Widmeyer, who's there as well. Betty's made an appointment with me. What do you think that's about? Like, did she not like my sermon? Did I do something wrong? It's only been a couple months. I was so scared that I had done something to cross Betty, and because I had heard about her and respected her legacy so very much. And so the day came for her to come and see me, and she walked into my office and she put a folder on my desk and she said, "Young man, Nathan, here are my wishes for my memorial service. It's the music and the readings that I'd love to have." And then she said in the most gentle and graceful way, "I know you've only just started, but when the time comes, I want you and my family to know what to do." What a gift that was. I did not look at that folder until the end of September and into October. And so now she's given us instructions to tell us what songs to sing and what readings to hear. She was such a joy for me to know, and I know for many of you. And I already really miss her, even though I didn't get to see her very much, obviously during the pandemic. She was in our worship service almost every single week after COVID hit in March. And what I loved most is that she would change her backgrounds on Zoom, and she'd put herself in San Francisco or on the beach, waving the palm fronds, waving behind her. Here's what I believe, my friends. Her physical presence may be gone, but her spirit remains. She is here. Her memories are here forever. And so we've come today to celebrate the person that she was, to lift up the stories that we have of her, and just to invite her in this Saturday morning in November, invite her presence into our lives and give her the time that our love for her deserves. And so we begin with some opening words. The first thing that Betty had asked is that we read responsively the 23rd Psalm. And we're going to put the slide up for that. And I'm going to read the first part, and then Emily Bruce, who's our ministerial intern, is going to read the second part, the responsive part. So please, everyone's muted, so just respond with Emily. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want.
He maketh me lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters.
He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake.
Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me.
Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over.
Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Friends, we will now light our chalice, which is a symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. If you have a chalice or candle nearby, I invite you to light it. And please join me in reciting our covenant. The words are in your chat box. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to help one another.
So Betty asked us to sing together 3 hymns this morning. And for those of us who are practiced at singing into our laptops with your sound off, it's a wonderful thing because no one looks around you and says you're off key. So maybe unless you're sitting with somebody else, but don't worry about them. So the first hymn that she asked us to sing was For the Beauty of the Earth. And our musical director, Sarah DeVoe, sings it for us, and the lyrics will be again in the chat box, so you'll have those there. We have several remembrances this morning, and we begin with Alex Dowse. Alex, we're all yours.
Good morning. On behalf of my family, I thank you all for joining, and if you can see on the screen, all of my brothers and sisters are here, and the siblings that came with them. Born Mary Elizabeth Paul on May 19th, 1921 in Winona, New Jersey.
I know you can talk louder, if you don't want to say it. Talk louder.
Mary was the single child of Alex and Mary Paul. She was blessed with loving parents and an active childhood. Mary was bright, smart, and adventuresome. She had many interests, including fishing, canoeing, horseback riding, camping, and traveling. All interests that she carried forward and shared with her family over the many years of her life. She graduated from Wellesley College in 1942 with degrees in chemistry and a relationship that would endure through a world war and raising a family of seven children on the farm in Sherburne. She completed her master's degree in 1967 and proceeded to teach high schoolers chemistry for the next 20 years. Upon retirement, she embarks on what she referred to as her next career, travel. And travel she did. Antarctica, Australia, Russia, Hungary, Europe, South Africa, Botswana, Southeast Asia, the Caribbean, and of course, every corner of the USA and Canada, including Hawaii, Alaska, Alberta, Labrador, and everywhere in between. Often she traveled with her sister on trips, and she would describe the relationship as a collaboration between one who cannot see and one who cannot hear, but they enjoyed themselves immensely. In Australia, on an elder hostel sponsored trip, they wanted to see the local town and proceeded to set out on foot. The local police picked them up, inquired what they were doing out in the middle of nowhere, where they were heading, and after a brief discussion, provided a comprehensive tour of the city and delivered them back to the hotel at the end of the day in the police cruiser. At 99 years of age, you would expect somebody would be content to ride softly into the sunset, relax, and rely on the efforts of others. But not Betty. Independent to the end. Oh, sure, she had dependencies for some tasks, but they always supported her need and her want for the ability to take care of herself. Let me tell you about growing up as one of her seven children and around the Dowse compound. Family and supporting family was always first and foremost, whether it was doing our chores around the house, helping out on the farm, or checking up and doing things with the elder grandparents. With the age spread in our house, we all had firsthand experience with childcare, household tasks, kitchen duty, or whatever else was required. Meals were always a family affair, every meal. They may not have been fancy, but we were well fed and never hungry, unless we chose not to eat what was served. And then we had plenty of time to think about it because we couldn't leave the table until everything was gone. Farm work was also expected. Every one of us had worked at the farm stand, helped with trimming trees, picking up brush, spraying for insects, picking apples, sorting fruit, making sweet apple cider, and doing promotion work for farming industry. Key to all of this was that Betty was an equal part of all of this until I fired her around the age of 90, or at least that's what she claims. Education and teaching were also her passion, especially for her girls. She was a feminist before it was fashionable. You would not tell her she couldn't do something, and she would prove you wrong quickly. Her combination of determination, organization, intelligence, and perseverance were part of an outstanding character trait that allowed collaboration, cooperation, practicality, and seeing projects to a successful completion. As she demonstrated, she also expected the same from all of us. All of my 6 brothers and sisters have degrees ranging from PhD to associate degrees at schools and universities. We have traveled the world in fellowships, study groups, promoting social programs, and representing industry support groups. In service to the community, her record of serving is unsurpassed. We all have a connection to be thankful for the results of all of those endeavors. At the time of her passing, she was still actively engaged with the Town Forest Committee. Betty's history is an extraordinary example of being engaged, engaging with perseverance, opportunities, and a sense of fellowship. We have lost an inspiring woman, but not the inspirations, as her legacy is not defined by the person, but from the person. We all miss her and we all love her dearly. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alex. Next, we have Lynn Walter. And Lynn, before you start, we just need Alex to unmute your screen, please. You're good to go.
Okay, to start off with, I can truly say that Betty was the favorite aunt of all of the cousins. We all had great memories of holiday dinners and gatherings here at 100 North Main Street. Some of Betsy's fondest memories were visits with Betty on Cape Cod. My sister Mary loved her passion for adventure, the Panama Canal cruise, and endless knowledge. She helped her with lesson plans for a science class she was asked to teach at the last minute at North Shore Community College. This was all done on just a short drive to Cape Cod. Mary always looked up to her for her skiing, canoeing, hiking, and science prowess. It was a helpful influence on her life. Cousin Susie has many fond memories of working at the Apple Stand for 8 years. She also remembers unexpectedly running into Aunt Betty at Marco Bay Campground in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And my brother Bob remembers fun times skiing in New Hampshire with the families. Cousin James always enjoyed playing words with friends with Aunt Betty, was also thankful that Aunt Betty took her in at 5 months old and raised her while her mother was suffering from polio or fighting polio. Cousin Kathy's memories are holiday dinners and working at the Apple Stand. She was also amazed at the hiking and traveling that Aunt Betty had done, especially after her 90th birthday. She was impressed to find out that she was one of the bright 7 sisters graduates who applied their brains and math science training to the war effort during World War II. She was cited in a footnote on The Code Girls by Lisa Mundy. My earliest memories, other than the holiday gatherings, were Black Mountain skiing up at Megan Les Brown's in Intervale, camping behind the Tuguses over here with Campfire Girls. My first job was at the Apple Stand, grading, selling, bagging, stocking the stand, as well as babysitting, cooking, ironing, and cleaning the house. She instilled great work ethics, which I carried throughout my entire life. In 1965, 66, I'm not quite sure of the year there, we took off with Priscilla, Nat, Kit, and John in an international travel towing a pop-up camper trailer to visit Alex in Cobalt, Idaho. We crossed through the Thousand Islands into Canada, picked up the Trans-Canada Highway, which we followed all the way to Calgary. Most of the campsites were between the railroad tracks and the highway. We drove the gravel road, which was a fire road, down to the US border. And one of the funniest memories of that trip was her new teeth sitting in a thermos cup on the dashboard. Such a fun trip. In 1969, I moved to California, and she came out numerous times to visit, as she did while I was living in Arizona. Always fun times. She was the first one to get to the hospital when my mother died in 1998, and she was so comforting. In 2006, I had the pleasure of enjoying Mother's Day with her at the camp in Rangeley. She cooked us the best steak dinner, and then we went off on a moose hunt. After a couple of hours trekking around some of Maine's best dirt roads, the only moose we saw was standing in her driveway when we got home. We loved hearing and seeing her photos of all of her adventures. Botswana, Antarctica came to mind first. She was always full of enthusiasm, encouragement, understanding, knowledge, stability, and always ready to explore. The last time I saw her was on Valentine's Day, 2020. I had just gotten out of rehab hospital of a broken femur. Priscilla drove her down in her new car. And she brought the most beautiful red roses, all great memories. The end of an era, and she'll be terribly missed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Betty wanted us to sing this next song. It is called "This Is My Father's World." It comes out of the Pilgrim Hymn Book. And again, we'll put the lyrics in the chat box for us, and Sarah DeVoe will sing. And by the way, these photos that are up during the songs are ones that Priscilla and the family have chosen.
This is my Father's world, and to my listening ears, all nature sings, and round me rings the music of the spheres.
And next we'll have Priscilla read for us after apple picking, the reading that Betty chose.
Thank you. My long pointed ladder is sticking through a tree toward heaven still, and there's a barrel I didn't fill. Beside it, and there may be 2 or 3 apples I didn't pick upon some bough. But I am done with apple picking now. Essence of winter sleep is on the night. The scent of apples I am drowsing off. I cannot rub the strangers from my sight. I got from looking through a pane of glass. I steered this morning to the drinking trough. And held against the world of hoary glass. I skimmed this, excuse me, it melted and I let it fall and break. But I was wet upon my way to sleep before it fell. And I could tell, but what my dreaming was about to take. Magnified apples appear and disappear, stunning and blossoming, and every fleck of russet showing clear. My insect arch not only keeps the ache, I feel the lamp sway, it keeps the pressure of the lamp around. I feel the lamp sway as the boughs bend, and I keep hearing from the cellar room the rumbling sound of blow on apple, the blow of apples coming in. For I have had too much of apple picking. I am overtired of the great harvest I have myself desired. There were 10,000 fruit to touch, cherish in hand, lift down, and not let fall. For all that struck the earth, no matter if not bruised or spiked with stubble, went surely to the silent apple heap. As up no word, no one can see what will trouble the sleep of life. Whatever sleep it is, where he goes on, the woodchuck could say whether it's like him, long sleep, as I described it coming on, or just some human sleep. Thank you.
Thanks, Priscilla. And for those of us that couldn't quite hear, I know the sound was a little bit tough. We've put the poem in the chat box. It's by Robert Frost. It's called After Apple Picking. So just look at that and or look it up later and know that this is one that was just a favorite of Betty. Next, our last remembrance will be by George Fisk. George, we're all yours.
Thank you, Nathan, so much. And I know one ordinarily thinks to take your cap off when speaking, but in this instance, I feel compelled to put on my Dowse's cap while I speak. For me, Betty Dowse was the essence of old Sherburne. She represented so much of what I think of, having grown up in a relatively small community where friendships are many and devotion to the town's well-being are deep. She, her husband Charlie, and the farm seemed to be part of everyday life. They took a great deal of pride in their century farm, as they did in serving the town in so many different capacities. For those who might not know, a century farm is one which is especially recognized for having been in continuing operation in the same family for 100 years or more. So let's see, 1778, 2020. Yes, I guess it qualifies after 242 years. That's quite extraordinary. I know that Betty had many other interests outside of Sherburne, her years of teaching science in the neighboring town of Medfield, and her many years of enjoying the peace and tranquility of her home in Maine. But when it came to Sherburne, she knew as much as anyone about its governmental workings, its many civic organizations, and its history. And she took an active interest and participated in all. I particularly remember her leading the charge on studying the quality of Sherburne's groundwater, so important to us as we rely on it for our everyday needs. She was especially concerned about the usage of salt on our roads and the detrimental effects it could have on our water quality and the natural environment near the roadside. Her service as and chairmanship of the advisory committee was stellar. As vice chair, I had firsthand knowledge of the amount of time and consideration she gave to each and every town meeting article. This consisted of many thorny and controversial zoning issues, as well as dealing with the important financial matters affecting every department and agency in town. She was always cognizant of the need to properly fund town functions and at the same time be sensitive to the requirements made of the tax-paying public. As an educational component, the Sherburne Historical Society makes efforts to periodically showcase various aspects of Sherburne's town history. One such program centered on the history of agriculture in Sherburne. I have a special fondness for the memory of that program, which we hosted at Silverwood Farm about 10 or so years ago. And for those who don't know, Silverwood is, for those who have been away for a while, Silverwood is a property that was at one time owned by the Fessenden family. I asked several people, including Betty and her longtime friend and fellow farmer, Phyllis Braun, to speak to an assembled gathering and to share their knowledge of farming and the memories of days gone by. You never heard more entertaining stories in your life. Betty even pulled out her records of my having worked at the farm when I was a teenager. Sorry to say, it was stark evidence of my lack of productivity in the apple orchard. She still had and shared, to my astonishment, wage slips showing the number of bushels I picked each day. Needless to say, it was really pathetic. In those days, we on the lower rungs were relegated to picking the drops on the ground, which were used in the cider making process. It's a little different today. I spoke with Phyllis Braun last week, and she told me she first met Betty about 70 years ago when she and her husband Bob moved to Sherburne. Phyllis, affectionately known as Farmer Braun, and Betty had overlapping interest in agriculture, which was to bond their friendship forever. Phyllis told me they would attend National Farm Bureau Federation conventions, work together on the annual Grange fairs, and close down their respective farm stands at 6 p.m. on Sundays so they could enjoy each other's company at the weekly buffet at the Wellesley College Club. In more recent years, the Council on Aging luncheons would be the weekly gathering spot for them. I'm told Betty was a bridge player. I know she was an excellent and enthusiastic downhill skier. In conversation with my good friend Martha Mahard a couple of days ago, she related a childhood memory. Martha grew up here in Sherburne and spoke of what she considered to be the most unforgettable field trip she ever took as a youngster. Apparently, Betty took Martha and other school children on a geology tour of Sherburne. They learned about moraines and eskers and other geologic features. Martha said it was the best and most memorable field trip she ever took, and I believe it. A poignant story about Betty and Charlie most people are unaware of, which occurred in the mid-1970s at a selectmen's meeting. I was there and I remember it well. One of the farm's hardworking boys was a young man who lived just up the street from Dowse's Corner. His name was John Nealon, and he was a devoted and trusted worker at the farm. Sadly, John lost his life in Vietnam on Christmas Eve of 1967. Both Betty and Charlie were moved enough by his passing that they came before the selectmen a few years later to offer a parcel of land at Dowse's Corner to be dedicated to John's memory. In recent years, both Nat Dowse and Bobby Bunton worked with me to erect a commemorative plaque on that site for him. A few little memorable tidbits for me. One is, I remember quite vividly in the 1950s being picked up by Betty when Betty would come to pick up both Butch and me after we had had our swimming lessons at the Wellesley College pool. Another in the 1960s, thinking about this, was wondering whether Betty knew about the hard cider we had stashed away in the big commercial cooler at the farm. Somehow I think she did. In later years, sitting at her kitchen table, talking politics was local politics particularly. We would talk about that. We talked over the development of the Porter apple, which was developed here in Sherburne, and the challenges of agriculture in modern society. More recently, I have to confess, I recall driving up North Main Street on a Sunday morning, only to see Betty walking down the street toward going to the church service. And I, of course, was hoping against all hope that Nathan wouldn't see me going the other way. I just want to say I'm both pleased and honored to have been asked to participate in this memorial service for Betty. Her knowledge of the town, its people, its history, and the place that she and the family took and the farm in shaping the community is evident to those who grew up here. We who are fortunate enough to have known Betty honor her legacy here today. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Emily Bruce. I am the Ministerial Intern at First Parish in Sherburne, and we are grateful for all of your presences here today. In her 99 years of life, Betty was many things to many people. Wife, mother, grandmother, teacher, neighbor, and as we've heard this morning, world traveler, seeker, curious learner, and passionate reader. Most of all, she was a friend to so many and so committed to engaging with the communities that surrounded her. Her loss is felt keenly by all of us here. She was a force of nature in her church community, in Sherburne, in her Loon Lake community in Maine, and all of the places that she traveled in this world. She has left all of us a powerful legacy. In the Jewish tradition, it is spoken of the dead, may their memory be a blessing. The blessing that the dead leave for us is their example, the ways they lived on this earth, the ways they loved their family, their friends, and their communities, and the ways that they worked to create a world better than the one they inherited. May we all be blessed this day by our memories of Betty, of her zest for life, her learning spirit, and her desire to be a positive force in the lives of those around her. May we also contemplate the legacy of the lessons that Betty taught us, the meaning she brought to the world, and the ways that we all can carry her legacy forward. Let us recall for ourselves the ways in which Betty touched our lives, and let us sit with the memories of the past. And let us also greet our futures which no longer have Betty in them in the same way, and yet are made richer for our having known her. Because while death is not the end of love or of her memory, it is still a real and painful separation. May we be inspired by Betty's life, and even inspired in her death. May we celebrate her life and not let our sadness of her loss overshadow the exuberance that she had for life. May we seek to embody the fullness of life like Betty did. And may we know the value of generosity, of community, of friendship, and of love, all values that Betty held dear. May the love of God and our memories of Betty, and the love that dwells between you and among you, hold and sustain you through this time. Amen. The Reverend Heather Concannon, who is First Parish's Minister of Faith Formation, will now offer our prayer.
As we rest into a time of prayer and contemplation, I invite you to find a comfortable position and join me in a spirit of prayer. Betty asked us to include the Lord's Prayer as interpreted by Mary Baker Edie in her memorial service. Mary Baker Edie's interpretation of the Lord's Prayer is as follows. Our Father which art in heaven, our Father, Mother God, all harmonious, hallowed be thy name, adorable one. Thy kingdom come, thy kingdom is come, thou art ever present. Thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Enable us to know, as in heaven, so on earth, God is omnipotent, supreme. Give us this day our daily bread. Give us grace for today, feed the famished affections, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And love is reflected in love. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. And God leadeth us not into temptation, but delivereth us from sin, disease, and death. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. For God is infinite, all power, all life, truth, love, over all, and all. Eternal Spirit of life and love, we are gathered here today in memory, in sorrow, in celebration, and in love. We are gathered to honor Betty's life and to grieve her death. Today we are held in the arms of the holy and with one another, all of those who were touched by Betty's life. Today we pray especially for Betty's family, for her children Charles, Alex, Mary, Nat, Priscilla, Catherine, and John, for Karen, Ken, and Pam, for her grandchildren, and for her great-grandchild, and all of those who loved Betty and shared their lives with her. We pray for all those whose lives have been left with a hole in them, an aching longing, for those final words unsaid, walks never taken, hopes unfulfilled, losses we have yet to discover. May we bring Betty's memory and spirit with us into our own work, knowing that we honor her by carrying on her life's legacy. In the weeks and months ahead, may we find the courage and the strength to celebrate and affirm life amidst the sorrow of Betty's death. May we find the courage to share our grief and our sorrow and acknowledge our heartache and our longing. And may we seek to continue to learn from and be inspired by Betty, even in her death, to embody the fullness of life that Betty did, knowing that her spirit is still very much alive within us and among us today. May our memories of Betty bring us comfort and connection in the weeks and years to come. May it be so. Let us rest together into love's silence and peace as we ring our church bell once for every decade of Betty's life.
please join in singing the hymn Gentle Presence. The words can be found in the chat box.
Oh, gentle presence, peace and joy and power. Oh, life divine, that owns each waiting hour. The love that guards the nestling's fluttering flight. Keep thou my child on upward wing tonight. Love is our refuge, only with mine eye can I behold the snare amid the fall. His habitation high is near and nigh. His arm encircles me and mine and all. Oh, make me glad for every scalding tear, for hope deferred, ingratitude disdain. Wait and love more for every hate and fear. Knowing since God is good, that loss is gain. Beneath the shadow of His mighty wing, in the sweet secret of the narrow way, seeking and finding with the angels sing. I am with you only, watch and pray. No snare, no foul pestilence or pain. No night strikes down upon the troubled breast. When heaven's after smile earth teardrops gain, and mother finds her home and happily rest.
So before we offer a slideshow of photos that Priscilla and the rest of her children sent for us to share, we will now respond with some closing words. Emily again will respond on behalf of all of us. Just reply with her. In the rising of the sun and in its going down,
We remember them.
in the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter,
We remember them.
in the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring,
We remember them.
in the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn,
We remember them.
in the beginning of the year and when it ends,
We remember them.
when we are weary and in need of strength.
We remember them.
So long as we live, they too shall live. For now they are part of us as we remember them. Mary Elizabeth Dowse, you have been called from your place of dwelling. May blessed soul friends guide you. May helping spirits lead you. May the gatherer of souls call you. Betty, may the homeward path rise up under your feet and lead you home and give you rest. All of us love you so very much. Friends, thank you very much on behalf of the family and all of us at First Parish in Sherburne for being with us. We'll now just enjoy a couple minutes, I think. It's about 2.5 minutes of slides and photos. These are all from Betty's archive, including places that she traveled, places that she loved, and of course, photos of her. Again, thank you so much for being here. It is a beautiful day here in Eastern Massachusetts. So wherever you are, get out this afternoon and be out into the world that Betty loved. And again, thank you so much for your presence. And all our love to you. Thanks, everyone.